Thank you, Senator Lambie. Senator Back.
Thank you, Acting Deputy President. With deep respect, Senator Lambie, through you, Acting Deputy President, I have to explain to you how wrong you are. Acting Deputy President, and I particularly appeal to Senator Carr, Senator Moore, Senator Brown, Senator McEwen and others in this chamber. It's not often that you actually rise and beg for bipartisan support across the whole chamber. Acting Deputy President, before I came into the Senate, I was an executive director in the oil and gas industry. It is an industry I know, and my comments to my colleagues opposite, and I wish they were listening, is to appeal to you, Senator Carr and Senator Moore, to appeal to you, and Senator Lambie, and you, Senator Wright, through the chair, to understand what it is that you are about to do. The people about whom you are referring, Senator Lambie, through you, Acting Deputy President, are not the people who are going to be affected by this legislation. In a previous life, I travelled on livestock ships, British officers, Pakistani crews. I travelled in and out of Australian ports, in and out of Middle East ports. I understand the maritime situation well. I don't want to go into the politics of this. What I want to say to you is to understand very, very clearly. I went to you, Acting Deputy President, before we had the maiden speeches tonight, because I want you to understand clearly what it is we're talking about. This is not something to do with party politics. What it is to do with is the employment opportunities of Australians. Senator Wright, through you, Acting Deputy President, you can't be more wrong, Senator, when you speak about low-paid international employees on these ships. I was on a platform supply vessel in Central America in December and January. This is an industry I understand. The sorts of vessels that Senator Wright was speaking about, and indeed that Senator Lambie just mentioned, are highly specialised international vessels, Acting Deputy President. They are platform supply vessels. They are dredgers. And you yourself, I guess, would have seen them operating in our northern ports. They are subsea installation vessels, Senator Wright. These are not low-paid international subclass workers. These are highly paid specialists. These are people who command the highest of incomes. Acting Deputy President, so that I could be accurate this evening, at 20 to 5 tonight, I called an international ship owner who has their vessels currently in the Gulf of Mexico. And I said to this ship owner, this is what is being proposed. I'm sorry you're leaving, Senator Lambie, because it's very important that you hear this. And I said, what is being proposed is that if you were to bring your vessels into Australian waters, you would immediately have to change the industrial conditions under which your highly specialised employees are actually registered to work. And do you know what this person's answer was? It was, Chris, it would be totally uneconomic for me to bring my vessels into Australian waters under those conditions. Now, I don't want to go down Senator Cash's path. I don't want to accuse my colleagues in the Greens of wanting to destroy the offshore oil and gas industry. So that is Senator Cash's right. I will not go down that path. But what I do want to say to you, and you are people who I admire and respect, often differ from, but we can have good discussions, Senator Siewert, as you and I have over the last couple of days on another issue. I want you to understand clearly that what Senator Cash has said here this evening is absolutely right. The sorts of positions on the vessels we're talking about are not those that Australians will replace. These are highly specialised subsea installation vessels. Again, a colleague with whom I spent a lot of time not long ago, he was brought into Australian waters to re-establish the Montara field, not only above surface, but was then asked, although he was competent to because he's one of the best in the world, he didn't want to, but he was asked to, and subsequently re-established the subsea structures as well. He employed Australians as the opportunity arose, but each of those crews was a highly paid, highly specialised international, the people who follow the vessels. These are dredgers, these are pipe-laying vessels, these are platform supply vessels. These are the vessels that produce the mud, the cement and pump it. This is not the sort of stuff you go and get people who are unskilled. This is the sort of work that is critical from an environmental point of view, critical from an occupational health and safety point of view. And what this person said to me at 20 to 5 this evening was, Chris, what you need your colleagues to understand, they said, if you hadn't got me out of bed in the middle of the night, if I was in my office, I would send to you the demand curve. Because they said to me, the demand at the moment around the world is so great for the highly specialised vessels about which we are speaking, that they said we could be operating as we are in the Gulf of Mexico, and there's an enormous demand at the moment. The Mexican government has increased radically its exploration drilling, and that's the work this particular group are in. Offshore Brazil, where the same company is bidding on work at the moment. The North Sea, West Africa, the waters to our north, in the South China Sea, all in huge demand. And this person said to me, Chris, if you think that the owners of these vessels and the highly skilled, highly paid international crews are going to come into Australian waters under these circumstances when we have got so much else work around the world, then you must tell them they're dreaming. Now, colleagues, what I want you to understand is this, that these vessels are very often the vessels that are directly related to the occupational health, safety and welfare of the Australians who work on the rigs. They are the people that take supplies out to the rigs. They are the people who take equipment off the rigs, take them into shore and do the necessary maintenance and repair work and take them back out. They are the people that look after the rig anchorage systems. They are the people who have the capacity in the event of fire, because their vessels are equipped also for fire control and fire suppression. So if, as Senator Cash says, and I've got to defer to you, Senator Cash, you are the Assistant Minister, I'm not pretending to be further enough across the issues associated with visas. But if it is the case that as of the time this is disallowed, those people working on those vessels find themselves illegal, let me tell you what's going to happen. Let me tell you what's going to happen, Senator Carr, through you, Acting Deputy President. The first thing is those people are not going to work when they are working illegally. And the second point I want to make to you is that those owners are going to remove their vessels from our waters. I can't tell it to you any more plainly. These are people who are friends of mine. My son-in-law is a Norwegian from the city or town of Stavanger, which is the centre of the Norwegian shipping and oil and gas industry. And I would like to engage with you at some time. I too envy the Norwegians for the sovereign wealth fund that they've got, Senator Wright. This is not an industry about which I have no knowledge. It is an industry that my family are involved in. It is an industry my son-in-law has helped to develop in terms of the, particularly some of the vessels, the offshore offtake vessels, the platform and offtake vessels. This is critically important, Senators, because if we can't supply the rigs, Acting Deputy President, if we can't do the dredging, if we can't lay cables, if we can't do the subsea installation, simply because the economics of it is not there for these owners, we are placing not just the $200 billion offshore oil and gas industry at risk, we are placing thousands of high-paid Australian jobs at risk. We are placing at risk the opportunity for Australians to develop the expertise that resides on these vessels. All for what? These people are already highly paid. They already travel with the ships. The ships don't stay all that long. They might stay weeks, they might stay months. If there's a dredging opportunity going on in Port Hedland, they'll stay there. That dredge, big Dutch dredges, were there the last time I was in Port Hedland. They'll be there for the length of that contract and they'll be gone, Senator, right? They're gone. But they're not going to be placed by Australians. If you bring through this disallowance this afternoon, those dredges aren't going to come into Australian waters and all of a sudden have Australian crews on them because they don't have the skill. We don't have a skilled base in this country. And we will never develop a skilled base in this country simply because those vessels aren't going to be here. The Australians who are getting jobs on them and learning from the highly skilled specialists who are there won't have that opportunity because they'll be operating offshore Brazil. They'll be operating in the Gulf of Mexico. They'll be operating in the South China Sea. They'll be operating off West Africa. And we are the losers, Acting Deputy President. We are the losers. So through you to Senator Lambie, this is not a situation in which tens of thousands of Australian jobs are being put at risk because this disallowance hasn't been put through. I say to you, thousands of Australian jobs will be at risk tonight and beyond, if these people find themselves in a circumstance in which this disallowance goes through. They will no longer be able to work in Australian waters. Those vessels, owned by overseas owners, with crews that are highly specialised and will leave Australian waters, they will go. And what we're left behind, unfortunately, is an industry at risk. We have at risk thousands of Australian high-paid. Your colleague, Senator Dio Wang, coming as he does from the mining industry, as I understand, in Western Australia, would understand the levels of payment in that particular industry. Let me finish with this, Acting Deputy President, if I may. Australia is already becoming non-competitive in offshore oil and gas. Our costs have now escalated to such an extent that the new developments offshore now, by the time they come into commercial production, the Canadians will be delivering LNG into Japan more cheaply than we are here in Australia. The managing director of one of the... I'll mention it because he did publicly. Speaking to Roy Krasinski, the managing director of Chevron, recently told me, and then he repeated it at an APIA conference. They have, of course, the big Gorgon project, which now started out as $37 billion, now $52. They've also got the Wheatstone contract further south. He said to me, well, they might have been able to put it on the mainland if there had been a place to put it. He said to me, he said, we are not going to go ahead with the next train on Barrow Island because the economics just aren't in it. So can I plead with you? Doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me. None of my family work in the oil and gas world in Australia, I can tell you. None of them do. So it doesn't affect me. Acting Deputy President, certainly affects Australia, affects my state, but by gee, I tell you who it affects. It affects thousands of Australian workers. Now, Senator Wright may have wonderful motives in moving this disallowance, but I, like Senator Cash, I want you all to understand very, very clearly that if you move and if you pass this disallowance, what you are doing is putting those very Australian jobs about which, through you, Acting Deputy President, Senator Lambie spoke, you are putting them at risk for no gain, but massive loss. And I just finalise again, if I may. The demand curve at the moment for the sorts of vessels we're speaking about is so high. Every shipyard, the South Korean yards, the Chinese yards, the Singaporean yards, Keppel and Sembawang, the yards in Malaysia at Johor Bahru, they are all building these vessels at the breakneck speeds because the demand is so high. And for any of us to think that we in Australia have got this magnetic attraction that everybody wants to come and work in our waters, I've got to say to you, Acting Deputy President, they haven't, and I really do ask that you think very, very carefully, because if you make that decision, if you agree to this disallowance, my plea would be that Senator Wright, on reflection, would actually withdraw it. But if she won't, I'm saying to each of you, if you pass this disallowance tonight, you are immediately not only putting Australian jobs at risk, you're putting a massive offshore oil and gas industry at risk, one that internationally is already becoming uncompetitive because of cost, and those who will be affected worse. Not one of them, Senator Wright, not one of them operating on a vessel at the moment will lose $1 because they'll be outside Australian waters so quickly, and the losers will be Australia. And I hate to say it, that this Senate will have made that decision. I can assure you I will, with some pride, be able to look my associates in the oil and gas industry around the world in the face and say, I did my best, Acting Deputy President, to convince my colleagues to not go down this path.
Senator